Tom, and thanks, Will. We'll go ahead and call to order the interim meeting of the NCOIL Property and Casualty Insurance Committee, the first Zoom meeting I believe that NCOIL has ever held. Will, if you will at this time, go ahead and call the roll.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Assemblyman Ken Cooley.
I'm on the call.
Wasn't sure. I'm not sure if that was intentional or not.
Did you hear me? I'm on that.
Yeah, we hear you, Assemblyman. It just came out like you were very drowsy or tired.
Or under.
Okay, Assemblyman Cooley is here. Representative Richard Smith.
Here.
Representative Matt Lehman.
Here.
Representative Peggy Mayfield.
Here.
Representative Joe Fisher.
Here.
Representative Daria Rendon. Representative Michael Weber.
Here.
Senator Walter Michael. Representative Chris Humphrey. Representative George Kaiser. Assemblyman Kevin Cahill. Senator Bob Hackett.
Here.
Representative Tom Oliverson. Delegate Steve Westfall.
Here.
And I'll go through the legislators who are not committee members but did register for this call. Senator Pamela Beadle of Maryland.
Here, thank you.
Representative Rick Gundrum, Wisconsin. Senator Matt Lesser, Connecticut. Senator David Livingston, Arizona. Representative Robin Smith, Tennessee.
Here.
Representative Amy Wallen, Washington.
Here.
Representative Wallen is here. Representative Joyce Weston, New Hampshire. Representative Mark Willitson, South Dakota.
Here.
Representative Forrest Bennett, Oklahoma.
Here.
Senator Lena Taylor, Wisconsin. Senator Chuck Edwards, North Carolina. Representative Joe Keller, Pennsylvania. Representative Tom Buford, Kentucky. Assemblywoman Carol Murphy, New Jersey. Representative Deborah Ferguson, Arkansas. Okay, are there any legislators present that I did not call?
I joined you late, Paul Etke.
Okay, Senator Etke.
Representative Frazier, Kentucky.
Representative Frazier. Okay, Mr. Chairman, looks like we'll need a motion to waive the quorum requirement.
All right, the chairman will entertain a motion to waive the quorum.
I so move, Assemblyman Cooley, to waive the quorum
Second.
requirement.
We have a motion and a second. Will all committee members indicate by voice vote of aye?
Aye. Aye.
And the quorum has.
Aye.
We ready, Will?
Yep, you're all set, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thanks. Good afternoon, and for those of you on the West Coast, good morning, and thank you all for joining us today. I feel honored to preside over NCOIL's first ever Zoom meeting. And as I'm sure we all know by now, by participating in numerous Zoom meetings throughout the past several months, there's a lot of pressure on the host of the meeting to make sure everything goes as planned. However, I'm pretty relaxed today because I know that if anything goes wrong, it's Tom and Will's fault. It's not mine. Even down to the jokes. If you don't like the jokes, you can blame it on Tom and Will too, okay? I'm also honored to preside over this meeting as the new chair of the Property and Casualty Committee, but knowing I have huge shoes to fill. The former chair was Georgia Representative Richard Smith, whom we all know and respect greatly, and has been a longtime supporter and active member of NCOIL. Richard recently became the Rules Chair in the Georgia House, which is a deservedly prestigious position, but comes with an enormous responsibility and a lot of demand of his time. Richard wanted to make sure that neither NCOIL nor this committee had any hiccups due to these additional demands in Georgia, and selflessly stepped aside as chair. He is committed to remaining an active NCOIL member and is indeed registered for this call and voted present just a few moments ago. Since I was chair of the Workers' Compensation Insurance Committee, we made a couple of other adjustments to the roster of NCOIL chairs and vice chairs. The new chair of the Workers' Comp Committee will be Texas Representative Tom Oliverson. Minnesota Senator Paul Utke will remain as vice chair. And now that we've got housekeeping business covered, I'll say just a few words before we begin. And I know that everyone is very busy as we all continue to deal with the realities facing the global health crisis in which we find ourselves. Really appreciate everybody's participation today. As you can see from the agenda, this committee has a lot of work to do over the next several months and even over the next 80 or 90 minutes. Accordingly, I asked to call this interim committee of this together because I wanted to be sure that when the committee meets in the summer meeting in September, hopefully we all get together in Alexandria, that we're not so pressed for time that people feel unduly rushed. We'll get started today with an update on CASTF's work at the NAIC. Tom will be handling that. As you know, earlier this month, the NCOIL Executive Committee met via conference call, and among other things, adopted a resolution in response to the work of CASTF. However, while the committee did adopt the resolution, it was agreed upon that the resolution would be held pending further discussion with the NAIC in the hope that work might be altered. After that, we will discuss the first draft of the NCOIL Distracted Driving Model Act, sponsored by Senator Hackett and California Assemblyman Ken Cooley. This will be a good opportunity to discuss the issue of distracted driving in general and examine the model's provision so that the committee doesn't have to start from scratch. Hey, Tom, at its meeting in September. Lastly, we will provide an opportunity for comment and discussion on the 5 NCOIL model acts that are scheduled for readoption. Per NCOIL's bylaws, all NCOIL model acts are scheduled to be reconsidered for readoption every 5 years. If a model is not readopted, it sunsets. I note that the models will not be voted on for readoption today, but rather this will be an opportunity for comment and discussion in advance of the summer meeting where the actual vote will take place. It is very unlikely that the September agenda will allow time for additional discussion on these 5 models, so we will hold the entire discussion now, but simply hold the vote until September. So Tom, if you are ready to go ahead and provide us with an update on the CASTF.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So over at the NAIC, the Casual Actuarial Task Force has been moving this document, and we had some extensive discussion on it at our spring meeting. And there was some discussion about maybe passing a resolution then. You all, in your wisdom, opted not to do that, to give the NAIC a chance to respond to NCOIL's concerns and discussions. But in the ensuing months, that didn't happen. So at a meeting of the executive committee, Vice President Cooley drafted a resolution, and that passed. And it was the decision of the executive committee to hold that resolution and not send it to the NAIC pending further discussions, specifically to add some language to the document that the white paper would not carry any weight of law or be binding on any state regulators or things of that nature, have no real authority. The NAIC, so we communicated that to the NAIC, and really we heard crickets back for some time. There was some officer-to-officer communication of late, and we haven't seen a change in the CASTIF document yet, but we do know that the principles on artificial intelligence before yesterday's meeting of their Innovation and Technology Task Force, where that document was considered, there was some new language that says these principles are guidance and do not carry the weight of law or impose any legal liability, which was just the type of language that NCOIL had in mind. It's not language we suggested. That wouldn't be our place, but it was just the type of language we had in mind. So that would be great if that's where it ended. I note, though, that the new language continued. However, this guidance can serve to inform and establish general expectations for AI actors and systems, emphasizing the importance of accountability, compliance, transparency, and safe, secure, and robust outputs. So I think that new language in total is a good step, but I think the NCOIL Executive Committee and Representative Cooley, who is the author of the resolution, will need to have additional discussions to see if that language meets the thoughts and intent of the Executive Committee when it decided to hold the resolution.
Thanks, Tom. Are there any legislators who would like to make comments on this topic? Likewise, if there are any interested persons on the call that would like to make comments on this topic, please use the raise your hand function. And Will, let me know if you see that someone does.
Any hands? We have Vice President Cooley, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and I'm trying to get to, yeah, I think that's interesting language. I mean, the concern is they're sort of bootstrapping authority and trying to shape what is the relevant yardstick in different jurisdictions. So I guess, Tom, I feel I need to kind of look at that with a little more reflection, but I definitely feel the first half of the sentence is fine. If they knew what a period was, it would be great. It's everything that ensues that starts reeling back what they said. But actually, I will need to look at that, and so that's kind of where I'm at. I appreciate your breaking it down. I definitely think that's a period. They're missing a period, and it sort of sets it back a little bit as an impression.
Anybody else? That's all we have, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Ken.
All right, thanks, Ken. Thanks, Tom. Next on the agenda, we'll move right into the introduction and discussion of the NCOIL Distracted Driving Model Act. The sponsors of that are Senator Bob Hackett, Ohio, and Assemblyman Kim Cooley, California. I'll turn it over to you guys and let you all go ahead and take it from here.
Thank you, Chairman Rowland and fellow members of the Property and Casualty Committee for taking time today to discuss this very important issue. Can you hear me okay, Chairman?
I can.
Good. I'm very pleased to be joined with Assembly Member Cooley to work on model legislation that will save countless lives from the dangers of distracted driving. The purpose of this bill is to not make more traffic stops or put more people in jail. It's to get drivers to put down their phones to save lives and prevent injuries. Despite increased public awareness and education efforts, distracted driving continues to needlessly kill and injure thousands of Americans every year. As a lawmaker from Ohio, I know this all too well. Traffic fatalities have increased in Ohio for 5 out of the last 6 years, all during a time period of having safer cars on the road. One thing we know is that distracted driving crashes and fatalities are significantly underreported. In 2018, 2,841 people were killed in motor vehicle crashes involving distracted drivers. The NHTSA reports that 8% of fatal crashes and 15% of injury crashes in 28 were distraction affected. And these numbers are likely much, much, much higher. We know that texting and handheld cell phones use are leading contributors to distraction-related crashes. These crashes are preventable, but we must make the use of wireless devices behind the wheel as unacceptable as drinking and driving. And we believe this bill creates a strong deterrent and a big step towards changing the culture of distracted driving. Currently now, 24 states plus the District of Columbia have enacted laws prohibiting all drivers from using handheld cell phones. And my great state of Ohio is hoping to make it 25. We have legislation pending. However, no model law currently exists. The proposed model we are discussing today closely mirrors the work we are doing in Ohio, but draws heavily on the revisions and experiences of other states that have enacted handheld cell phone bans. Most notably, it borrows key provisions and best practices from the recent enactments in Georgia, Tennessee, and Arizona, making it ideal to pass as a model. Ohio's bill is a result of a task force study that began in 2018. At the time, only 15 states in the District of Columbia have enacted primary free laws, and what the task force found was that 12 of the 15 states experienced a decrease in fatality rates within the 2 years of passing hand-free laws, while 2 did not yet have sufficient data to report to us. 6 of the states in the DC saw more than a 20% decrease in fatality rates, including a 31% decrease in the state of California. I am honored that Member Cooley agreed to co-sponsor this effort with me. We know that these laws are an important part of the strategy to reduce traffic deaths and crashes. Now to the specifics of the model. The model defines wireless communication devices to include not only cell phones, but also tablets, laptops, and other devices. It prohibits the use of a wireless communication device while driving, and this is real important in Ohio. It makes it a primary offense, allowing an officer to cite a driver for using a device without any other traffic offense taking place at the same time. This includes language similar to texting bans in 48 states by prohibiting writing, sending, or reading text-based communication. And also bans all non-navigational viewing, such as watching or recording vehicles, taking photos or looking at images, live streaming, using applications. However, it does provide exemptions for voice-operated hand-free use, emergency situations, and for first responders, along with a single swipe. The bill also prohibits all wireless communication device used by school bus drivers. This is a common provision in bills advancing across the country. Lastly, the bill creates a tiered penalty enforcement section that establishes both monetary penalties and points. We have found that strong enforcement is key to ensuring the bill is effective. In Ohio, we tended to align with similar dangerous vehicle infractions. Mr. Chairman, thank you for allowing me to speak on this, and I'll give it to my co-sponsor.
Go ahead.
Well,
Senator.
very good, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Chair Rowland. Thank you, Senator Hackett. You know, I think this is just a very important bill, and I relate this to things we have done in California over the years. Yes, we have a hands-free driving law already in place, but you know, I remember in my career when, man, we chewed our nails. Everyone was anxious about a mandatory seatbelt law. There's a time in which that seemed like a hill to climb to get a mandatory seatbelt law. And we started with secondary enforcement and realized, no, this saves lives. This is of such immediate practical value. And California then made the jump to primary enforcement. Now seatbelt laws are ubiquitous. They're so commonplace. And in the same way, I think back to the anxiety lawmakers had when they thought about maybe kids on bikes ought to wear a helmet. And yet so many head injuries happened that you just couldn't turn a blind eye to that. And the legislature stepped up and we did a helmet law. And I use those two examples of the seat belt and the helmet law because no one who does this sort of life-saving statute wants, we feel a little squeamish with the enforcement piece, but the enforcement piece just kind of drives home that this ought to be the new routine. We should just organize our lives so we don't break the rule. It's not a revenue maker, although it has a financial element, so it's a authentic encouragement to compliance. But the role of enforcement on this sort of statute is actually just designed to drive the behavior into practice. I think it's extremely significant that the American Academy of Pediatrics is supportive of this statute, this type of provision, not specifically this model, but one of my things that I harp on all the time, it already sort of came up here this morning with the NAIC, is they operate without really legal authority for the things they do. And we're in an area with them where they're trying to break new ground, which no one's delegated this task to them. No one's delegated, they don't have legal authority. And yet they constantly want to kind of expand their reach. Different than in the NAIC, the American Academy of Pediatrics exists to save lives, to provide medical guidance. It is their specialty. It is their field. It is the sort of thing that regularly in California across my career, we have actually delegated certain decisions to the American Academy of Pediatrics, where if they felt that there was a standard that was right, we would incorporate that into law. They are a very prestigious organization. And so to have their support, what they have said is in the U.S., primary enforcement of distracted driving laws do lead to lower incidents of fatal motor vehicle crashes involving 16 to 19-year-old drivers. That would be the age group that they're looking at. They're looking at new drivers, young drivers. Bans on all handheld device use and texting bans for all drivers get the biggest decrease in fatal motor crashes. And adopting a universal handheld cell phone ban in all states would reduce distracted driving mightily and decrease motor vehicle crash fatalities. And another reason I just feel the primary enforcement is important. Secondary enforcement, of course, means they can stop you for anything else, and then if they see you're using the phone, they can ticket you for that. But they had to stop you for something else. Any of us driving around, we've seen people watching movies, talking to their phone, looking at videos. It is blatant, observable behavior. And so primary enforcement is the way to deal with blatant, observable behavior to make clear it's not really acceptable. So distracted driving will remain a part of our lives, but I actually think this is a tremendous bill. We've gone down this trail in California, and I think it's the sort of thing where, as lawmakers, our job is to work on the future. And this is certainly a new phenomenon, the ubiquitous nature of these things. It actually brings to mind, and this is my concluding remark, William Shakespeare in his play Julius Caesar, All About Government, said, "There is a tide in the affairs of men, and they who capture at the flood ride on to victory." I think there is a tide, and this is a moment for us to jump on that tide, to say this is a problem, to be bold, to step out, propose this across all the 50 states on behalf of NCOIL and our sworn public responsibilities, and move this along. So, Mr. Chair, I conclude my remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Assemblyman Cooley. We also have signed up to speak today Kathy Chase. She's president for the Advocates for Highway and Auto Safety. The Advocates for Highway and Auto Safety is a coalition of national consumer health and safety organizations and the majority property casualty insurance company and trade associations. She first joined the staff of the Advocates as a legislative assistant to the vice president in 1996 after graduating from the George Washington University Law School. Kathy, if you're ready, we'll let you go ahead and give your presentation.
Thank you for that nice introduction, but I don't know how I follow a Shakespeare quote. That's tough. I got to use that one though. I'm taking note of it. I'm going to steal it. I must admit, well, first of all, thank you for having me today. And I must admit that when I was with you all in Utah a couple of years ago, I really enjoyed that scenery of the mountains better than my home office. But I look forward to future collaborations together outside of my house. And I'm sure you all feel the same way. It's nice to see some familiar faces in this crowd. What I plan to cover, and thank you again for the invitation, but the remarks that the legislators made were outstanding, and there might be a little bit of duplication, but I'll try to limit that. What I plan to cover in the next about 10 minutes is a very brief history of distracted driving laws, information about who Advocates is, the challenges of driver distraction, and why new optimal laws are needed to address modern devices, vehicle safety technology to help overcome distracted driving and other behavioral issues, and lastly, your excellent model distracted driving bill. First, to set the stage, a high-level timeline of distracted driving laws includes that in 1997, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, also known as NHTSA, issued its first report on distracted driving. In 2001, New York became the first state to address distracted driving by enacting a ban on handheld cell phone use. In 2003, research determined that merely talking on a cell phone while operating a vehicle disrupts the driver's attention, which can lead to inattention blindness, or the inability to recognize objects in a driver's field of vision. In 2007, Washington became the first state to enact an all-driver texting ban and returned in 2010 to upgrade the law to primary enforcement. In 2009, the National Transportation Safety Board, or NTSB, announced a ban on text messaging and talking on cell phones for their staff. In 2011, the NTSB became the first government agency to call for a complete ban of non-emergency use of portable electronic devices, including hands-free devices while driving. The NTSB has also repeatedly included ending distraction on its most wanted list of transportation safety improvements. Between 2011 and 2020, state legislatures have addressed distracted driving by enacting all driver texting bans, graduated driver licensing, also known as GDL, cell phone bans, which are complete prohibitions on use, and bans on the use of handheld cell phones. I just realized that I did not put up my PowerPoint. I'm sorry. Hold on one second. There we go. Is it working?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. I just jumped right into it. I'd now just like to share some brief information about who we are at Advocates. We're a unique alliance of consumer safety, law enforcement, medical, and public health groups and insurance companies working together. Created in 1989, our mission is the adoption of federal and state laws, policies, and programs that prevent motor vehicle crashes, save lives, reduce injuries, and contain costs. We target improvements for safer occupants and road users, safer vehicles, and safer roads. By addressing these aspects of road safety through our 3 program areas, we pursue a comprehensive approach to yield the greatest benefits. This slide shows some of the major successes on motor vehicle safety that we have worked to advance. These improvements were realized through the collaboration between many partners, including victim advocates, other safety organizations, insurance industry members, of course, state legislators, and members of Congress. Some of the successes were realized after decades of consistent and dogged advocacy. This work is vital considering that 36,560 people were killed on our nation's roads in 2018 at an annual cost of $836 billion. And to drill down on distracted driving crashes in 2018, nearly 10% of drivers were using a handheld or hands-free cell phone at any moment during the day. 8% of fatal crashes and 15% of injury crashes were reported as distraction-affected crashes. 2,841 people were killed and 400,000 injured in crashes involving a distracted driver. distraction-affected crashes imposed an economic cost of $40 billion. And as was mentioned previously, these crashes are very well known to be underreported for multiple reasons, including issues with police reporting and databases. To get a pulse on how the public is feeling about the issue of distracted driving, we commissioned a public opinion poll in January, which shows the public both supports state laws and the issuance of grants to states to improve their current laws. This was tied in with our advocacy efforts, which I'll talk more about in a bit. So the question is, what do we do to address this problem? On the state level, every January, Advocates releases our annual report called the Roadmap of Highway Safety Laws, in which we rate the states on the adoption of 16 optimal laws, including addressing distracted driving. We also highlight the issue of distracting viewing and the need for laws to be updated to ban such use. Highlighting an issue is the way that we signal that we may be rating it in future reports. This report showed that 46 states and DC have enacted primary enforcement all driver testing bans. 31 states and DC have enacted primary enforcement GDL cell phone bans. And the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, or IIHS, has found that 25 states and DC have enacted primary enforcement handheld device bans. Some states that have passed all 3 distracted driving laws are upgrading their laws to do so by banning distracting viewing, such as Illinois in 2019, or considering bills to do so, such as New Jersey and, as was mentioned, Ohio this year. As our technology has evolved, so must our laws. Laws banning texting while driving remain critical, but they must now be expanded to also ban the breadth of distracting platforms and uses, such as video chatting like FaceTime, streaming video, taking photos, games, and social media apps. On the federal level, we are recovering from a Herculean effort on H.R. 2, the massive House bill called the Moving Forward Act. It included a provision to incentivize states to ban distracting viewing by offering a grant award and a provision to require automatic emergency braking, or AEB, in all new vehicles. AEB in particular will be very helpful to preventing crashes when a driver is not paying attention. Unfortunately, this bill is DOA in the Senate, so we will continue to push to accelerate the adoption of proven crash avoidance technologies. These systems can help prevent crashes from occurring, as well as mitigate crashes that do occur, potentially lessening the severity. Unfortunately, the systems currently are mostly in high-end vehicles or sold as expensive trim packages, which often include non-safety items and luxury upgrades. We think everyone should benefit from proven safety technologies, and as such, they should be standard equipment with compliance with minimum performance standards. We commissioned this graphic on the left to create a logo for our endgame advocacy efforts to demonstrate all of the issues covered in H.R. 2, namely technology to prevent impaired driving, updates in the new car assessment program known as NCAP to educate consumers on safer cars, limo safety, potentially fatal issues with keyless ignition and push-button starts, the incidence of children dying in hot cars, truck safety, and AEB and other crash avoidance solutions. On the right side is a list of other pending federal legislation which addresses distracted driving, some of which were folded into H.R. 2 that we've worked to get introduced and continue to push. I'd be glad to provide any additional information about these bills. My contact info, which will be on the last slide, which is soon approaching. Some of you may already be familiar with this slide from IIHS, which shows the safety benefits of crash avoidance technology. Advocates works closely with IIHS as we are not a research organization, and we rely on their great work to inform and support our policy positions. These technologies are also crucial stepping stones to autonomous vehicles, also known as AVs. Not only would performance standards for the technologies and requirements that they are standard in all new vehicles help ensure that technology is working as it should, but it will also get consumers accustomed to driving with assistive technology. However, distraction associated with partially autonomous vehicles and vehicles with driver assistance technology is a growing concern. This problem was completely predictable considering human nature to do something else if you think the car will handle the driving task or components of it. This underlies why performance standards for driver monitoring and engagement systems are needed. In fact, the NTSB has also called for performance standards for driver monitoring systems for partially autonomous vehicles to ensure driver engagement. This recommendation followed their investigations into multiple crashes in which automated driver systems were used or being tested and the driver was distracted by device use, including the Uber crash in Tempe, Arizona, which killed Elaine Herzberg, and the Tesla crash in Mountain View, California, that killed Walter Huang. On the issue of automation complacency, I'd like to share two illustrative quotes from experts in the field. Dr. Missy Cummings, who runs the Duke Robotics Lab, and with whom Advocates has collaborated in developing our AV policies, has said, not only do drivers get distracted by self-driving tech, not understand its capabilities, and ignore its alerts, it also gradually erodes their skills, leaving them unprepared to handle regular operations when the time comes. And Kostas Smaris, an AV specialist from Carnegie Mellon, has noted that, quote, robots make excellent backup drivers to humans. Humans make terrible backup drivers to robots. Looking further down the road with highly autonomous vehicles, it will be essential that proper safeguards and oversight are put into place. Advocates has been working with a broad coalition to ensure that AV legislation and regulations include provisions to best ensure public safety. Lastly, the proposed NCOIL model distracted driving bill includes provisions that retain the ban on the most distracting activity, texting, which involves manual, visual, and cognitive distraction, while banning new distracting uses that have become available as the technology has developed. Advocates supports the proposed NCOIL model distracted driving bill with two essential changes. As was discussed, primary enforcement should be required. Secondary enforcement laws are weak and unnecessarily difficult to enforce. In fact, pending legislation in Ohio, which was meant to upgrade its distracting driving law, would make it a primary enforcement, and this is a change that Advocates has weighed in to support. Secondly, language to require complete GDL cell phone bans should be added. This age group has the highest proportion of drivers in fatal crashes reported as distracting. Recent research on distracted driving found that states with primary enforcement distracted driving laws that had lower rates of fatal crashes involving 16 to 19-year-old drivers and passengers, and reinforces Advocates' recommendation for primary enforcement. And as Advocates takes a purely safety point of view, we would of course prefer that the model bill not include, that use is not permitted hands-free. However, we understand the political reality and appreciate the efforts made to restrict hand-free use. Before I conclude, I'd just like to thank our Senior Director of Advocacy and State Legislation, Tara Gill, who actually had to jump off because when I went to sign in, you all were at capacity at 100 and wouldn't let me in. So for her efforts on this presentation, and I again want to thank you all for listening and for this opportunity.
Thank you, Kathy.
You're welcome.
I think Frank, do you have a few words to say about the distracted driving bill as well?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I have completed the most important task of any Zoom call, taking myself off of mute. Not always successful. I want to thank Kathy for her remarks. Also thank the sponsors for putting this bill in. APCIA has long been active on distracted driving issues in a number of states, and we view this proposed model as a worthy addition to the arsenal of legislation that would deal with this particular issue. As you know, coming from an insurance perspective, fighting distracted driving is important both from an insurance perspective, but more importantly from a societal perspective. It's just the right thing to do. So in sum, this proposal is a welcome addition, and we look forward to participating in the NCOIL process as legislators consider this model. With that, I hand it back to you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Frank. Do we have any legislators on the committee or not on the committee that have any comments to make?
Yes, sir. This is Richard Smith in Georgia. We
Yes,
passed
sir.
that bill a couple of years ago, and we had a report this past spring that Georgia Highway Patrol issued around 50,000 distracted driving tickets. Now, if you get out on the highway, even though we passed this bill, they could have probably written a couple of million if they'd have had the opportunity, because you can drive from, I live in Columbus, about 90 miles south of Atlanta, of interstate all the way. And, you know, you cannot go up that road without seeing things like what you were talking about, people read these kind of things.
I'm right here.
So what we, you know, when we passed ours, and I was adamantly opposed to one of the sections of it, and that was the penalty. We had a $50 penalty, and when you went to court, if you showed that you had bought a hands-free device, that penalty was removed. My recommendation, and I still support this, when in order to get somebody's attention, you got to get in their pocketbook. And my proposal was to go $300 the first time, $500 the second, $1,000 the fourth, and lose your license for 6 months. You know, this is a serious problem. Even though we passed it a couple of years ago, it is just as serious today as it was to then. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Any other legislators on the call that would like to make some comments? If not, I think there are some other interested parties who would like to make comments. Andrew Kirkner, if you're on the call, I think you had raised your hand to make some comments. Go ahead. Is Andrew on the call?
He's muted.
All right, I think I've got it unmuted. I've called in from my phone, so I didn't know I had two-step unmute. So I guess Frank did a little better job unmuting than I did. I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the rest of the committee for your work on distracted driving legislation. To use Assemblymember Cooley's analogy, NAMIC's happy to ride the tide here and support the distracted driving model. I also want to thank Senator Hackett and Assemblymember Cooley for their sponsorship of the bill. We've reviewed the bill. We've received some technical comments from members, and certainly would love to work with the committee and NCOIL staff to make some slight technical corrections to the bill. But overall, we think the model is a big step to improving safety on roads across the country, and we really appreciate NCOIL's leadership in the space. So thank you very much.
Hey, Andrew, I just want you to know, and I don't think it's necessarily fair, but Frank just tweeted out that APCIA is far more tech savvy than NAMIC based on what just transpired.
Well, Tom, it would be very difficult for me to rebut that right now. So.
All right, thanks, Andrew. I think also Wayne Weichel from Alliance for Automotive Innovation would like to make some comments. Wayne, if you're on the call, feel free to go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, my name is Wayne Weichel. I'm with the Alliance for Automotive Innovation. We are a new association that represents 99% of all the manufacturers selling in the U.S., as well as tier 1 suppliers and other automobile technology companies. I want to thank the two sponsors for filing this important model law. Auto Innovator members have been working for years to improve roadway safety. And the first step in doing so is helping consumers keep their hands on the wheel and eyes on the road. As such, we have supported texting bans and handheld bans all across the country, and we are supportive of NCOIL's efforts here. We do have some concerns that some of the wording may loop in inadvertently some vehicle systems into prohibitions. Vehicle systems have been designed by engineers to be used safely while driving. For example, the prohibition on entering a new address while you're driving, that is something that's worked into vehicle systems, but not in an actual handheld phone. So we'd just like the opportunity, as indicated by NAMIC, to maybe work with Will and the sponsors and other committee members to work through this ahead of the September meeting. But it is something that we are highly supportive of.
Okay, thanks, Wayne. Anybody else have any comments on the proposed model we're hearing about today? Legislators or interested parties?
Chairman Rowan,
Yes.
can you hear me? This is Eric Henning from General Motors.
Hey, Eric.
Yeah, and I don't want to be duplicative of what Wayne Michael has indicated, but we are also very supportive of distracted driving model and distracted driving prohibitions. I know that I've worked on it in a number of states that were mentioned earlier, like Georgia, Virginia, Tennessee, and Florida. Obviously, if the language is worded correctly, we'd like to see these pass. Not only from a company perspective, but we also have on a personal note, our president of international operations, his son was killed by a texting driver. So he has made this a very personal mission for these laws to pass. So I know that we have proposed several amendments, which we think are really more cleanup amendments to the provisions to make them so that they work for us. I don't think that they take away from what was intended. So we'd like to continue the discussions on this as we go forward.
Thanks, Eric. I shared your comments yesterday with the NCOIL executive staff, so they have those and should make those available for everyone to see.
I think they did. I think they put it on the system. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate the sponsors bringing this forward.
All right, thanks. Anybody else who's not currently driving that would like to weigh in with any comments?
Hi, this is Kristen Smith, Road Safety Policy for Uber, and I'm joined here with my colleague, Aaron Brand, who's the legal director on our U.S. regulatory team. Thank you so much for drafting this legislation, and thanks for the opportunity to weigh in on it ahead of time. We know that distracted driving is a really serious road safety issue in this country, and we're committed to working with partners to be addressing these issues. We really design our app with safety in mind in terms of riders, drivers, and other road users. And in general, we support the aims of this specific legislation. We do have a few recommendations for clarifying the bill. I think in general, we're really supportive of hands-free legislation that prohibits individuals from interacting with devices in a way that could cause them to be distracted while driving. But at the same time, we really want to make sure that any hands-free legislation is carefully crafted to ensure that individuals can continue to use technology that they rely on in a safe way. So for example, we agree with the language in the bill that would clarify that individuals can engage with an app with one swipe or a tap, which mirrors language in key state laws out there about distracted driving, including here in California. In this modern world, we know there's a range of different apps that people might be using for wayfinding and navigation. And we're just concerned that as it is, the language could be interpreted as limiting an individual's access to obtaining basic text information or visual cues through the ride sharing or navigation apps. And we just want to say this, we know this goes beyond ride sharing, and drivers of all types are using an array of navigation and other apps to be getting around safely, whether that's Google Maps or Waze, and that those kind of products can make it easier and safer and more convenient to be traveling. We don't believe the intent of the drafters was to limit these kind of tools, but we plan to submit some proposed technical edits to the team to make sure that the bill language doesn't have unintended consequences that could prevent information that a driver might be needing in order to safely navigate the vehicle. So thanks for your time, and thanks for letting us weigh in on this. Look forward to working with the sponsors and stakeholders of this specific bill.
Mr. Chairman? I don't know if Assemblyman Cooley and Senator Hackett are both on, but it was our understanding when we drafted the bill at their direction that they did intend to have people not be fumbling with Waze and the like when the bill was drafted.
Well, I think that's right. I mean, the language of the bill is that fact. Pardon me, that's Assemblyman Cooley speaking. The way I sort of react to that remark, Tom, is We are
Ken, your audio
a
is.
lot of innovative tools are being developed by people. The Depositway. I'm on a mountain hillside in the Sierra, so I apologize for that.
Okay.
The long and the short is, I think the sooner the legislature sets some boundaries and rules, people who are innovators will just integrate that into their product design. So we definitely need to be listening as to GM. It would be asinine to invalidate systems built into cars to be safe. And the sooner we have clear sets of rules, other innovators making apps and other things can factor these sorts of rules in to their product design. So we will, I think that's just another reason why it makes sense for setting some legal standards across the US to shape the marketplace and even product design.
Yeah, the only thing, I'm going to see if I'm on mute. No, I'm not. The only thing that I add is if you look at the Ohio legislation, it does ban a lot of viewing, but it's all non-navigational viewing. And I think maybe Uber wants to talk about maybe more of the navigational issues and issues with how their systems work in their day-to-day operations. But we still have to be careful. And I agree with Assemblyman Cooley in that they'll probably make the changes to make their equipment work. But we want to make sure that we left navigational viewing as allowable. We know that's very important.
Thank you, guys. Any other comments on this topic? If not, we'll move ahead now to discussion on the readoption of the 5 NCOIL model laws. We will open it up for comments on the model laws listed on the agenda. We will proceed in order of the models as listed on the agenda, and I'll first ask legislators for comments and questions, and then we'll follow with interested persons. So the first model up for readoption will be Post-Assessment Property and Liability Insurance Guarantee Association Model Act. It was originally adopted November 2007, amended March 2015. This model has been very successful. Essentially, every state's Property and Liability Guarantee Association laws have adopted provisions from this NCOIL model, the NAIC's model, and the National Conference of Insurance Guarantee Funds model. Any legislators out there that have comments on the readoption of this model? Will, do you see anyone?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Hey, Bart.
Yes.
Hey, Bart, this is Matt Lehman. I can't find a little chat button. Maybe I'm text challenged here, but I'll just jump in. My understanding is, and just to reiterate, we are discussing these, but a final vote on this will take place in September, correct? The readoption.
That's correct. Okay.
And I don't want to jump ahead. I apologize. I've got a caucus call I got to jump on here. I would like to, if I could, exert executive privilege and jump down to E on the transportation network. I think that's gone very well. That was my bill. Anybody have any issues on that, reach out to me and we'll chat. But if not, I apologize, Mr. Chairman. I got to jump off here and get on that call. But I look forward to the discussion on these, and I'll probably watch the video here and see what discussions we have, and we'll be in touch. But thank you, Bart, for what you're doing on this call, and we'll see everybody down the road.
All right. Thank you, Mr. President. Do we have any interested persons who would like to make any comments on the readoption of this model? Barbara Cox, if you're on the call, I think maybe you have some comments.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Can everybody hear me okay?
We can.
Excellent. I am representing the National Conference of Insurance Guarantee Funds. That is the national coordinating body for the property casualty trade associations. The readoption of this model. A couple of things we might suggest at such time as NCOIL would want to entertain them. We do have new language that would permit a guarantee fund explicitly to assess members in times of low activity. That's a matter of keeping the guarantee fund safety net open and operational. As much as we try to pre-plan with insurance departments, liquidations do often happen suddenly, and we feel that the always ready posture is what's best for the policyholders and policy claimants. An additional amendment would address restructuring transactions, and I know that's been something that's been much discussed at NCOIL. The position of the National Conference of Insurance Guarantee Funds is that claims that would have been paid by the guarantee funds before the transaction continue to be covered after. Conversely, restructuring transactions such as an IBT should not create guarantee fund coverage where there was none to begin with. And again, we do have language that we could offer up to NCOIL on both of these matters, and we definitely support the readoption of our model.
Okay. Thank you, Barbara. Anybody else comments on the readoption of this model? If not, we'll move on to the next one. The next model up for readoption is the Model Act regarding Medicaid interception of insurance payments, first adopted in November 2014, then amended March of 2015. The model is based on a Rhode Island statute, and Texas also has a similar system. First, are there any legislators on the call who would like to make comments?
Mr. Chairman, it looks like Assemblyman Cooley has his hand raised. I don't know, was that on the prior model, Assemblyman, or the current model?
It was actually the guarantee fund. I think we just ought to have the suggested amendments provided to NCOIL so they can be reviewed. In general, the guarantee funds are doing their work in a constantly changing marketplace. New ideas emerge. I think it's very important to listen to them on what they feel is the right set of current authorities for our model to incorporate to align with their understanding of their operating environment. But we just should see those amendments early before we're at our next meeting.
Good point, Assemblyman. All right, any interested persons on the Model Act regarding Medicaid interception of insurance payments? Anyone have any comments on the readoption of that model? If not, we'll move on to the third one, which is the Storm Chaser Consumer Protection Act, first adopted July 2015. About half the states have either adopted the model or a similar statute regarding contractor fraud and abuse. Any comments from legislators on the call first? If Steve Riggs was still here, he'd have something to say, I'm sure. Any interested persons have any comments to make on the Storm Chaser Consumer Protection Act? Okay, if not, we'll move on to model number 4. The Model Act regarding use of credit information in personal insurance was originally adopted in November 2002, readopted November 2005, amended in 2009, adopted again in November 2015. And this model has been one of NCOIL's most successful models, having been adopted in approximately 30 states. We'll start with legislators first. Any legislators on the call who would like to make comments regarding the readoption of the Model Act regarding use of credit information?
Mr. Chairman, I would just note that the original sponsor of this model Can't speak to it. Sadly, he passed away shortly after its passage.
Thank you. Will, if you see anyone with their hand raised, please let me know.
Yeah, I don't see any legislators with their hand raised. I see some interested parties. So if there's any legislators,
Do we have any interested persons who would like to make any comments? Frank, are you still on here? Did you have comments you wanted to make?
Yes, I do, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. Frank O'Brien with the American Property Casualty Insurance Association. Mr. Chairman, I think you are exactly correct. This is one of, if not the most influential and considered model bill that NCOIL has ever adopted. It has been debated and passed in a significant number of states. Vermont was the last state that adopted it, most recently, to my knowledge, in 2018. But the fact of the matter is that when states consider this issue, both on the legislative side and on the regulatory side, this model and its provisions are always considered. The most recent example of this was just this past May when Superintendent Chapa in Maine pointed to this model's extraordinary life circumstance provisions when issuing a bulletin encouraging insurers to work with customers whose credit might have been affected by the pandemic. The superintendent did this notwithstanding the fact that Maine is one of the states that, while it closely regulates the use of credit for insurance purposes, is not a state that has adopted the NCOIL model. In short, Mr. Chairman, NCOIL has carved itself a leading role in this issue. This model has been a key feature of the debate. It has been, that's been the case for a long time, and it will likely to continue. It's been reauthorized several times, and given its influence, given the attention that this issue is getting, we would urge NCOIL to adopt it once again. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Frank. Any other interested party on the call right now?
Chairman Rowland?
Yes.
Hey, this is Wes Spitzer with a big I. Can I offer a couple of comments?
Yes, sir, Wes. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon and good morning, everybody. I wasn't going to plan. I hadn't planned to make comments until Tom made a reference to the original sponsor of this proposal, and so I think it might be a little bit appropriate. I'll say his background, that the Big I was a strong advocate of this proposal in the beginning back in 2002, and we remain so today, and would urge you to reauthorize it. I did want to say, though, that the chief proponent and sponsor of this was a legislator named Tim Osmond from Illinois, and he was an outstanding public servant. He was also an independent agent, and what he saw in the late 1990s when the use of credit began by companies was that he saw some troubling business practices, and as a legislator and as an insurance agent, he could do something about it. And what he did is he came to NCOIL and developed a proposal that, as Frank just said and as Tom said, has been arguably NCOIL's most significant success story. The bill imposes guardrails, allows for the use of credit in responsible and sensible and customer-friendly ways. And although Tim Osmond, who was a great guy, passed only 2 or 3 weeks after this model was originally adopted, it remains as important and viable today as it did when he was working on it, almost 18 years ago. So we would urge you, given its success, given its relevance today, we'd urge you to reauthorize it when you reconvene in Alexandria. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Wes. Thanks for that background information for the folks who are on the call today. Anyone else on the call with any comments on the reauthorization of the use of credit information in personal insurance? If not, we'll move on to the last model before us, and that is the Model Act to regulate insurance requirements for transportation network companies and transportation network drivers that President Lehman had mentioned before he had to jump off the call. This model has also been one of NCOIL's most successful. Nearly every state has enacted TNC legislation, which either mirrors or is similar to the NCOIL model. Some of the statutes were enacted before the NCOIL model as well. Any legislators that would like to make comments on the reauthorization of the TNC model? Any interested persons on the call who would like to make comments on the reauthorization of the TNC model? Will, do you see anybody with their hand raised?
No, Mr. Chairman, I don't.
Okay. And since earlier we did have some technical difficulties with Zoom, and they were limiting the number of folks that participated, we still had other folks that were trying to get on. I don't know if we've got that fixed yet or not, but if you were not on the call earlier and you had any comments, that was during the time we were discussing the proposed distracted driving model. So if you're on the call now and you weren't then, and you have any comments to make on the distracted driving model, please let us know now. As Will and Tom had noted, this is the time for discussion on the reauthorization of these models. Should we get to meet in Alexandria, the agenda is going to be pretty tight, and it's our hope there that the committee would just take a vote at that time on reauthorization of these 5 models, and all the discussion is wrapped up today. Any other discussion from members or interested parties on any of the models? Okay. One last piece of business before we adjourn. As you know, registration for the NCOIL summer meeting is now open. The meeting is going to be a hybrid format such that there will be both in-person and virtual attendance options available. However, for those who plan on attending in person and have not yet registered, NCOIL urges you to do so as soon as possible, as there's a limited amount of space available due to capacity constraints required by social distancing at the hotel. You can find the registration information online, and you should be receiving emails from the NCOIL staff on a regular basis. Any other business to come before the committee today? It's been an honor to chair the first NCOIL Zoom meeting ever. I expect we'll be doing some more of these. If there's no other business at this time, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn. This is Assemblyman Cooley. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Most ably guided.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Do I have a second for adjournment?
Our second is Delegate Westfall.
I have a second. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Thank you all. Hope to see you in Alexandria.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, everyone.
Job well done. Thank you.